due out at 8:30 Eastern Time. We focus in on the rising price of food. Last month, we saw a 1% month-over-month increase in food prices. To discuss more, we bring in Judy Ganes, Ganes Consulting President. Judy, there are many dimensions to this. There's the pressure that in developed markets people are feeling because real wages are declining in the face of higher costs of living. Then there's the emerging market story, which could be a whole lot more dire. Let's focus on what's happening in developed markets for a moment. How much upward pressure should we consider there is still to come from food price inflation? Or is this something we can say a lot of this has been priced in already?
Well, there's two things. First, the prices of the raw ingredients have increased, but they're not at what I would say nosebleed levels, historic levels. What's really causing some of the food inflation is the increases in packaging and manufacturing costs and rising labor costs for the manufacturers. And so it's become a tsunami of price rises, not just in having a quick pop in sugar or cocoa prices or coffee prices. There's more to it this time.
So is there anything that the government can do about it?
No. I mean, it really has to run its course. And the key part to that is, in terms of the raw ingredients, we need good weather. So we had some pretty poor growing conditions last year in Brazil, for instance, which is the largest producer of sugar and coffee in the world. You had a extended drought and you had a record number of frosts last July. And so that damaged production. So we need to have the higher prices cause producers to take action to increase supply. And at the same time, higher prices also cause demand to shrink. And it takes time.
What's happening, Judith? I'm from the great state of Ohio, but I don't go home that much these days. What's happening to the American farmer? I mean, for years, they were subsidized. They were paid not to grow. They were throwing away the excess food that they did actually harvest. What is the American farmer doing right now?
Well, the American farmer was trying to plant as much as they possibly could. The unfortunate thing is that there's been this dome of heat that slowed plantings and caused some problems. And, they hope for rain because that's what's really needed. So, for example, Texas, where you have a huge cotton crop, only 15% is actually emerging right now. So you need to have the good weather to get the crop started.
Well, on the subject, Judy, of weather, of course we talk a lot about the issues the food supply is facing now in terms of the war in Ukraine, the labor shortage that is out there, fertilizer issues, all these things that seem supply side driven at this moment in time. And yet we are also in a world in which the planet is warming, weather events are more extreme, including drought. I mean, how do you think about longer term ramifications of climate change and how it's going to affect the ag market for years to come, not just right now?
Well, one of the things that has to happen is technology has to catch up. So that's in place already, where you have more disease-resistant varieties, you have shorter growing cycles. So seed manufacturers are working within the industry to try and create plants that can tolerate some of the new extremes in the weather. Some of the weather is just based on cycles, and you have confluence of long-term cycles that impact the market. So, for instance, we had low sunspots last year, and you had this hole in the solar vortex, and that helped to usher in a lot of the cold weather, which caused the damage to the coffee and sugar crop. This year, we're now back to neutral conditions. And so La Nina is going away, and we're looking now towards El Nino.
Judy, it seems like there's a lot of environmental factors then to consider. There's also war in Europe, and that's cited by a lot of people as putting upward pressure, of course, on food prices. I saw an assessment by the UN Maritime Organization that to take mines away from all of the Ukrainian ports where a lot of grain and other products are trapped would take months. Do we have any sense of what is trapped there and how long we have to get it out before it starts to before we start to price in even higher food prices?
That I'm not an expert on, but I can tell you that other countries will pick up the slack because they understand what's happening. And that's why, say, sugar, my areas of expertise, say sugar and coffee, coffee is not really impacted because it's not a major growing area. But as far as sugar, trade flows get adjusted. And we are shifting to a small surplus for the 22-23 season. And so that's not going to have a long-term impact. You know, if you look back, I've been covering these markets for almost 40 years. And I remember when Cuban sugar production collapsed with the fall of the Soviet Union, breakup of the Soviet Union. And Thailand started increasing their sugar so dramatically, we wound up with oversupply.
Finally, Judy, how does the strength of the dollar factor into all of this?
So when the dollar is strong, then people aren't buying U.S. commodities, and it also behooves producers to want to sell faster. Right now, we have a situation where we watch very carefully the relationship between the Brazilian real, the Brazilian currency, and the U.S. dollar. And when the Brazilian real has been very weak, then you have stepped up exports from these countries, and that helps to depress the market.
Judy, thanks so much for your time. Judy Gaines-Chase, J. Gaines Consulting President. Thanks for joining us here on this program. Coming up.